I was the first security engineer at Anduril, and the Anduril executives were like, protect the company. I could do 100,000 different things. What do? Every product decision at Wraithwatch comes down to remembering moments like that. That's what drives product decisions here.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the US Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. Nick Seetharaman and Grace Clemente have about as elite a pedigree as you can have as a defense tech founder today. Palantir, Anduril, SpaceX. Between the two of them, they've touched the holy trinity of modern defense juggernauts. They've seen how great companies are built and what it takes to win. And yet, perhaps contrary to what you might believe as an outsider, they've felt real pain at each of those stops. Today, they're the co-founders of Wraithwatch, where they are building the tools they wish they could have gifted themselves as the lone individuals, respectively, responsible for insider threat and information security. Their mission today is to move security from a cost center to a growth driver, and to turn cyber warriors into superheroes in the process. It was a true honor to sit with these two great Americans who are well on their way to building software that will power America's next generation of cyber defense.
All right, everyone. So we're here in beautiful Washington, D.C. with Nick and Grace, two of the co-founders of Wraithwatch. And not just co-founders of Wraithwatch, but probably two of the most tenured defense tech founders that you will find in the space. You guys have incredible backgrounds. When you talk about, Nick, we talked about the holy trinity, the trifecta of Palantir, Anduril, and SpaceX, not even to mention your service in special operations. And Grace, you've been at two of those three companies as well. You guys really could be doing anything, certainly in this industry and probably in the world right now. Why is Wraithwatch the thing that you are spending your one crazy precious life on?
Yeah, I think, we talked about this a little bit a moment ago, but I think the big motivator was not just for our own selfish pain points when we were building out some of these cyber programs at places like SpaceX and Anduril, but, we looked at our teams, we saw their struggle when we moved from one company to the next. We talked often about, I wonder how they're doing, wish we had this technology for them. I wonder why no one's building this type of product. And we, imagined and dreamed up and whiteboarded and talked about what we would want to have gifted those teams, like our old colleagues. And Wraithwatch is what we wish we could have gifted them. And so that's what we're setting out to build. I think that's one of the primary motivators for all three of us.
Someone in our positions could have chosen to do pretty much anything in the Valley or in DC. And I think it was a conversation with the previous In-Q-Tel CEO that really kind of slapped me in the face for a minute and made me realize I have a lot more I could still contribute to the world and to the defense community. And it basically went something like, I was living in Bozeman, Montana at the time. And he was like,
my favorite place in America.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great town. And he was like, you live in Bozeman? What are you, 55 and retired? He was like, you need to get back out there and keep grinding. I was like, you know what? You're right. I do need to get back out there and keep grinding. And one of the reasons we started Wraithwatch was we asked ourselves, what is it that we can still contribute back to the community and make some kind of impact, both to the cybersecurity world and to the defense tech world? And Wraithwatch was born out of those conversations and those lessons. One thing we realized building out cyber defense programs at SpaceX, Palantir, Anduril was we would talk with a lot of companies that were not in the core kind of Silicon Valley ecosystem. And they would have security teams that were desperately trying to protect their own companies and the products that they were building, mom and pop aerospace and defense shops, small regional banks. And they were doing their best and they were unable to contend with just the advanced nature of the adversaries that were coming after them. And we realized, these people find themselves in a cyber cold war that they're not even witting participants in, and they're not armed for success here. And when we started the company, we said, okay, how do we take the lessons learned in the trenches of building cyber programs, defending critical infrastructure, rockets, weapon systems, multinationals, take the expertise and skill sets that were locked up in security teams in Silicon Valley, the Netflixes and the Metas and the Googles, and then encapsulate that in a product and then propagate that product out, not to just, high paying enterprise customers, Fortune 50, Fortune 100, but get it in the hands of anyone and everyone in the American industrial base, defense and otherwise, who might need to protect the things that they're building from the folks who are going to come after them. And that's ultimately one of the reasons we started this company.
Yeah, I think there's a really sad, very backwards mindset around security and compliance, especially in all these aerospace defense manufacturing companies. It's everyone's taught to care a lot about compliance first. And compliance, came out of some very good intentions. But I think what's happened over the course of many years is people just want to check boxes and they don't care about in-depth security and defense. What is going to be a long-term solution, especially when you get more attention from an adversary. And so people are just focused on get the compliance check so that you can work with the government. And I think that's a very sad thing that's happened. And I think there's a lot of reasons why the security industry as a whole is to blame for that, the cybersecurity industry as a whole. And so one thing we talked about was how do we help people meet compliance frameworks, but also really have a robust security program early on. And that's one of the things we're trying to do at Wraithwatch is give you both at once.
I'm excited to dive deep in here. I think so much of what you guys are saying resonates, even in the, we used to call it security theater, right? With the things like the authorization to operate. I think the ATO process in the government's a really good example of this, where for a really long time, it was this risk mitigation framework. It's how many pages of checkboxes can you do to show that your software is going to be secure on a network, which is actually pretty much completely divorced from the in situ security of that product once you're actually running, which you guys know better. But I think what we've started to see is some steps. Curious for your thoughts on this, of the government recognizing, okay, well, we actually need continuous authorization. We need to continue. Software's never done. It is going to be continuous change. So how can we start to get at the intent of what that compliance is all about, while actually allowing the teams to do the work they need to do to make this software more secure in the long term?
Yeah, I would say to that the adversary doesn't give a shit about your compliance state. They really don't. You can check every compliance box under the sun, and Chinese cyber warfare unit 61398 is still gonna come after you and get their hooks into your network quite easily. And so to us, compliance is table stakes, and a foundational component of a security program that inherently needs to incorporate many more controls than what the compliance checkboxes are going to tell you. So what we try and do, not just with the company today, but when we're advising, startups that are working on novel technology, there's a lot of folks working on some very futuristic sci-fi things that come to us and are asking for advice on how to bootstrap their security programs because they know they're going to be on the radars for these folks. They're like, what do I do? Because the auditors are coming after me. I need to get this compliance stuff taken care of, but also I want to be secure. And so what we do is try and lay out a roadmap for them to get secure first and then get compliant as a byproduct of being secure. And that seems to resonate well with them because I think people want to check the compliance boxes, but they also want the kind of security and warm, fuzzy feeling that they are protected against adversaries being able to reach their networks.
I think also there's this really absurd language that's used in a lot of these compliance frameworks. It's let's simplify some of that language. Let's explain, I think part of every compliance framework, in my opinion, should be let's offer whoever the potential end user of these frameworks is some suggestions on solutions. This annoys me to no end. It kind of feels like a trap, like a test, but offer some solutions. One thing you might deploy to get a sense of all the assets in your environment is this type of software. Use Jamf or use, whatever it is, Intune. There should be some website that's offering you some tooling that says, here's how you do both. Here's how you be secure and also meet these compliance frameworks or line items. And so one thing that we've talked about is a lot of times at these early companies, we know from our own experience, the people that are often thrown in to help get ATO and check all these boxes don't know anything about cybersecurity. they definitely haven't built out physical security programs, cybersecurity programs. They can't be expected to. And so they're kind of fumbling their way through, just saying like, how do I do the bare minimum to meet this item? And that's unfortunate, frankly. I think there is opportunity here to simplify language, to offer suggestions on tooling and modern technology that can help you meet these line items and actually make you secure.
Yeah.
So we're trying to just bake that right into the product for you.
Yeah, another thing I'll say too is we can talk about ATOs, we can talk about continuous ATOs, but that process occurs at the tail end of an entire other process that occurs to the left of it, which is the product that's going to go through ATO, or the infrastructure that's going to go through ATO is going through this build phase. And as it's going through that build phase, that is the juiciest time for an adversary to get their hooks into that particular weapon system or vehicle or infrastructure. So you can look at the software bill of materials, you can put the thing through compliance paces, you can look at it via an ATO lens, but were you looking at it for the entire life cycle of its existence? And that is the thing that we're trying to hammer home into these founders working on novel stuff, is that try and bootstrap a security program from the earliest possible moment you can, because as soon as our friends overseas realize that you're building a piece of novel technology in some vertical that they have on their list of targets to go after, they're immediately going to come after you. And the best thing to try and do is bootstrap some kind of early security program to at least slow them down while you get everything else ramped up, and then fine, let's go through the ATO wickets after the fact.
It's such a simple concept, really. Like, imagine that we were on the other side and we wanted to get into like these much bigger, companies, Raytheons, the Boeings. We wish we had gotten in earlier. Now they have these robust security programs. As an adversary, we're trying to break in constantly. The first thing I would say to do is, all right, let's stop and look at, are these larger companies acquiring smaller companies? Are the smaller companies able to afford someone who's thinking about security all the time? No, definitely not. Are they still building this technology that's likely to get the attention of the Andurils, the SpaceX, the Raytheon, the Boeing, the Lockheeds? Yep. Let's try to just get in those mom and pop companies now. Get to the manufacturing companies, act like sleeper cell, live off the land, and once they're acquired, try to snake your way into the larger businesses. Like, that's what I would do from the beginning. It seems like a very simple strategy, and we're simplifying it here, but it makes a lot of sense. I think there are ways, cheap ways even, to roll out good, robust security programs as a founder in a startup with only 10, 20, 50 people.
It's almost like blindingly obvious once you lay it out, but it's not something that we're necessarily talking about at the earliest stages of companies that are building in this space. I think about, the kind of the Mike Brown work at DIU when he took over that organization, where the big thing was like, hey, look, foreign investment, and the kind of the Eye of Sauron, if you will, has been focused on foreign investment over the last few years of CCP and others using capital to kind of get access to some of these technologies. And maybe we've solved that, maybe we haven't. Maybe we've overcorrected. You guys can opine on that. But this other kind of piece of it, which is, well, actually go earlier and think about who is producing this technology, because now, great, we have this proliferation of interest in defense and national security, which I think is a great thing. But it means you have a lot more people, a lot more shots on goal, so to speak, of people theoretically building things that will get acquired and will get kind of absorbed into these supply chains. And you all are focused on those companies first, not the government first, which I think is an interesting, Grace, your first line was like, these companies don't have the programs we need. Typically, I think this is criticism that we've heard levied at the government. I'm sure you have some. I don't know if CMMC is solving all problems or not. CMMC. Talk us through how you all decided kind of where you were going to focus first and why commercial versus kind of federal was the right place to start.
Yeah, I think for us, we always wanted to start with the commercial space because the defense industrial base in the private sector is really the dynamo that runs the American national security apparatus. It's the Lockheeds and the Andurils and all of the other emerging startups that we saw at Manifest Demo Day. Startups that are working on really cool things. Satellites, nuclear reactors on satellites. Just all kinds of emerging technologies that, just 20 years ago would have been sci-fi. And all of those companies are targets for foreign intelligence and cyber warfare outfits to get their hooks into, establish footholds in their network, figure out what they're up to, and then over the course of time, exfiltrate trade secrets. We saw this all the time at previous companies, Grace especially, who built out the insider threat programs and counter-espionage programs at SpaceX and Anduril.
Yeah.
You know, we saw this every single day. There was just a couple days ago, I think, you know, it hit X, this big kind of fiasco around Deal allegedly placing some agent at Rippling and getting caught trying to exfiltrate secrets from Rippling. And everyone's like, oh man, corporate espionage. And we're looking at each other like, this was...
If only they knew.
This is child's play.
Every day at certain, you know, places that we worked at in the past. And it's kind of par for the course. It happens. And so that's why we wanted to start with the American and allied defense industrial base. They're the ones building the technologies that are going to be utilized on the battle space in the next 10, 20 years. And the adversaries are trying to get their hooks in there now, and we're trying to get the defensive protections in there now.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many good close friends that have left SpaceX or Anduril, gone on and started companies or just were the first of like 10, 50 people to join a company. And a lot of those companies are in El Segundo, California or Texas. And they're working on incredibly hard on really novel defense tech. And I kept thinking, dear God, if they get hit with the attention that we got at places like Anduril and SpaceX, even fairly early on, like a couple hundred people when we were at Anduril, you would be shocked every time there was a PR push or something. There's a lot of interest that comes out of that. And all I kept thinking about, I mean, literally this would keep me up, and I would text my friends being like, hey, here's some like simple things you can do to secure what you're working on. Like tell your boss, tell your teams, like just do this to your phone, do this to your laptop, like buy the software. It's really cheap. And, you know, we talked a lot about this when we were building out the product. Like, how do we get this in the hands of people that aren't classically trained security engineers or even software engineers? Like, how do we propagate out lessons we've learned and help them protect what they've been building as a company of 50 people that's just doing some tests in the Mojave Desert?
How do those conversations go at the early stage when I think a lot of these folks have learned the lessons of places like Y Combinator and others, where it's like at the earliest stage, you're building the thing and you're selling the thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't typically say you're building, securing, and then selling. It's you're building and selling. So how do those conversations go?
So the interesting thing about working with aerospace defense manufacturing companies that have a role in defense tech is that security for them is actually a revenue generating activity, whereas at most commercial companies, it is a cost center. You don't get to sign a contract with the federal government unless you have a litany of security controls in place. And so every startup you talk to that wants to do any kind of business whatsoever with the federal government, which seemingly today seems like all of them, you don't get to do that unless you have security controls in place. So there's a forcing function to execute security much earlier in the company's life cycle than I think you normally would have 5, 10 years ago. And, you know, so a lot of folks are looking around like, well, what do we do?
How do we do that?
We have this CMMC thing, and like the government saying we have to do all this, and like I have to log on to his website and self-attest to, you know, how secure I am. And one of the things we tell startups all the time is, go ahead and start knocking out these, you know, line items for CMMC. Let's get you secure in parallel. And while we're doing this, we can also, you know, help you check that.
Yeah, I think there's actually been really good reception from people. I do believe that a lot of these founders, like early employees of these companies, care a lot about, you know, securing up their networks and their endpoints, their laptops and stuff. I think many people saw what happened just in the opening hours of the Russia-Ukraine war, like Viasat getting taken down. I think those were very publicized events. And I think it made people realize that the war starts on endpoint to endpoint, on system to system, before it even starts like on a battlefield. And if you're building weapon systems and technology, damn sure that they're going to come for your systems first. They want to either steal your technology or slow you down, you know, or even at least understand what you're building. So there's
actually a doctrinal term for this capability, and it's called OPE, Operational Preparation of the Environment, specifically cyber OPE. And what that doctrine states is that long before kinetic combat begins, digital preparation of the battlefield is to take place, whether through gray zone activities or whether through more technical activities. And part of what China and Russia and some of these other foreign adversaries have gotten really good at over the past 10, 20 years while we were all off fighting the war on terrorism is they got really good at operational preparation of the environment. And that's why, China was able to emplace, allegedly, a lot of advanced cyber weaponry and pre-place it in critical infrastructure across the United States. There's a memo that went out to all the governors, I think, a year ago from the federal government saying, you guys need to take a look at your water infrastructure and your power grids and other critical infrastructure across the state because we have evidence saying that China is all up in there. And so there is a doctrinal component to you will do this prior to engaging in kinetic conflict. And when it comes to the United States and China, this is especially relevant when it comes to the Taiwan conflict. Because in the opening hours of the Taiwan conflict, I guarantee someone is going to flip a bunch of switches and activate advanced cyber weaponry that has been in place in Taiwan or at, forward deployed installations overseas, US and allied, that are going to take down a lot of our capabilities unless we do something to ferret those out today.
Yeah.
As you guys know, there are thousands of cybersecurity companies out there.
Yeah.
And many of them growing insanely fast, right? Wiz, I think the fastest growing startup ever.
Yeah.
It actually boggles my mind how many companies kind of play in this space. I think you guys are vectored at something very specific, but I'm curious how you talk about this internally of like, what is the Wraithwatch brand or difference relative to this kind of huge ecosystem and industry that's emerged over the last decade or two?
One of the frustrations we had, I'm sure Grace has a lot to say here. One of the frustrations we had when we were at previous companies on the buyer side was every vendor that we would look at, every emerging cybersecurity startup we would look at for purchasing decisions would be these singular, very narrow point solutions focused on a very small percentage of the pie that we had on our plate as defenders. And we said, where is the tool that unifies all of these things together and breaks down the data silos that exist across all of these tools? If you look at the way these tools are utilized at companies today, they all live in their individual silos. They don't talk to each other. And you can't command and control them in a kind of holistic, synthesized way in response to a certain threat. And cyber teams are all about response today. It's all reactive. We'll get into how we're thinking about the proactive side of the house in a bit. But when you're reacting to a threat, sometimes you have to log into 13, 14, 15 different tools and start turning knobs in response to that threat. And we said, this is an incredibly sad state of affairs. Let's not even get into, user interface stuff. Grace.
Yeah,
Grace
I feel
will
like
talk
I
about.
gotta control myself here because
Let it rip.
I think honestly, poor Nick. When I got to Anduril, I think the first thing that I lit him up for was I was like, because he was the first one at Anduril building out the security program there. When I got there, I was like, what is going on? Why are there 40 different tools here? Like, why do we have? Without naming all of them, I was like going through a list one day. I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, this is insane. I have to, in order to get context on a system, some tools integrate with some tools and then some don't speak to each other. And if they do integrate, they only serve one purpose. It's like they can help with a single type of SOC playbook alert, or this one over here helps with cloud. And this one over here is specifically Palo Alto can connect with these tools. And I have to connect everything to my SIM. And then I still have the one that has to build out the alert and detection. And I was like, this is insane. We need to, one, pause and look at what tools work well with each other. Where are there redundancies? Because I'm already seeing redundancies across these tools. So we're burning cache where we don't need to be burning cache. And we sat down and we were chatting about this. We're like, where are the products that are doing this? This was a problem we had at SpaceX too. It's like, we're buying these tools for good use. Right? When we set out to purchase one of these products, it's for good reason. There's a problem and we need to solve it. So we buy the tool. And one day you wake up and you realize that you have 40 tools that solve one specific problem or 3 problems. And as you grow and as your company expands and your team expands, you realize you have more problems and some of these tools are outdated. They don't speak to each other. They're battling each other. And There is no place where you can quickly gather an incredible amount of context about a given problem, whether it is a problem or attack, or it is a real world anomaly that's happening inside of your environment right now. I had this happen every hour of every day that I worked at SpaceX and Anduril. My phone was going off at 3 a.m., at 2 a.m., at 1 a.m., at 6 a.m. with some kind of an alert. Getting context to help me immediately respond and me being able to write back a decision about what I want to do to that person's system, their laptop or their mobile device, was impossible. It took me hours sometimes. And that's wildly unacceptable. Like, we need to be working faster. I also think one of the things that's quite sad, I mean, you alluded to this a moment ago about the UI, is when I was at SpaceX, I'd be sitting at my desk, which the way the SpaceX headquarters is set up is they have a huge campus. There's like the headquarters, or the old headquarters building, which was in Hawthorne, California. And then there's a bunch of other buildings that are scattered around. And everyone during their like breaks seemed to love to walk through the factory floor. Like, everyone wanted to see fairings being built and like Octaweb and, Falcon Heavy.
That sounds pretty
Yeah, it was
cool,
badass.
Yeah.
Like, so you walk through there, you get a lot of motivation. You're looking at the most innovative, incredible technology being built. And then you go back to your systems on the cybersecurity team and you have the saddest UIs. Like, truly this like white and purple, like fun, looks like a kid's play toy thing from 1995. It does not make you feel badass. It doesn't make you feel like you're commanding systems to protect against cyber warfare. We're talking all day. We're trying to tell people about how, China tried to break in, Russia tried to break into our systems. And then they look at our tooling and like, it's just sad. It's just sad. It doesn't read the same. You don't feel the same motivation as a cybersecurity engineer with the tooling we give them.
Yeah. So what we said when we started Wraithwatch was a few things. Number one, we're done with point solutions and, singular kind of narrow products. We're going to build a product to encapsulate all of the other products and make them work together in the same way that, our previous employers, especially at Anduril, utilize systems to fuse together sensors, turn that synthesized sensor data into something actionable, and then propagate that actionable decision into effectors that are going to do something with that data and that reasoning. So we said we're going to draw a box around all the other boxes and tie them together in synchrony and build a platform that utilizes all these tools cohesively so that operators can make better decisions quickly. And then the second thing we said was, and when they're in the tool, they're going to feel like Tony Stark in Iron Man and be able to command the tool, ask questions, build context, show me that system spinning around, show me the systems around it, who's got access to that, where do they last log in, okay, contain that guy, quarantine this one over here. We want users to feel powerful and gain rapid context, because it is only through that rapid context, decision-making, and execution speed that we have any kind of fighting chance against the kind of cyber adversaries that are after us and the entire industrial base that we're trying to protect here.
There's such an important point in what both of you just shared, which is the humanity of the actual user. When you talk about being user-centric, it's like, well, this is a freaking important job. And I think we used to talk about the military like this all the time. The tech poverty that we impose upon our service members. They can go home and order a pizza way more friggin' easily than they can do their jobs in the field. And it's been imposed by, systematically through a whole variety of acquisitions morass over decades. And so to hear that you're saying, actually, no, this is actually what folks, even in the private sector, this is what this area, this kind of like skill set, this job function has been kind of neglected from a user experience standpoint. That alone seems like a really important insight that would be kind of a huge unlock for this world.
Yeah. And, it makes sense in a world where cyber is the cost center. It's like, yeah, okay, let them use the tools that, look like 1995 Unix programs. But now we're entering a world into where, your cybersecurity team directly affects the revenue that your defense tech company is generating and how the government views your company and how serious you take protecting the technology that you're building. And these are all decisions that are inputs into how a contracting officer views the maturity of your company, how Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency views the security of your company. And if your security teams are using old, slow,
unexciting
tools from 1995.
Barely any visibility.
And they are no longer your cost center, and they're a core part of your revenue generating operations. That's unacceptable to us. We want to arm them with the most powerful, capable, intelligent tools that we can possibly provide to them. Speed to decision. We always get the question of like, what are you guys after? Like, what's your objective in coming to a conference like this? And our answer is, hey man, we'll always take additional, leads to fill the top of funnel for the company. That's great. We're talking to, big enterprise customers. We're deployed today to, aerospace, defense, manufacturing, emerging tech companies. That's all fine. But leads are not the problem. The problem is showing people a vision of what cyber defense in the future could be and what software products in general in the future could be. Software products in the future should not be a B2B SaaS dashboard from 2008 where you're looking at a pie chart and some, fractions on the screen and trying to make decisions. It should be a symbiotic relationship between you and an intelligent reasoning system that's crawling through your systems and taking the cognitive load off of you and doing a large part of the homework for you. So that when you come in, all you have to do as a human is parse through what is most critical for you and your organization, whether that's you as the CISO or the CIO, or whether that's you as a junior SOC analyst, and then execute on that decision. That's ultimately the world that we're trying to get to for these cyber teams. And if we do it right, maybe we'll expand that capability beyond cyber, but ultimately that's what we're shooting for. And again, it comes from a place of what would we have wanted to gift ourselves, as Grace puts it, 5 years ago when I was the first security engineer at Anduril, and there was 100 people at the company, and the Anduril executives were like, okay, protect the company. And I'm like, okay, what do I do next? Like, I could do 100,000 different things. What do I do? And remembering what it was like to be in that situation is every product decision at Wraithwatch comes down to remembering moments like that, or remembering moments like you face at SpaceX. That's what drives product decisions here.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I mean, I think a lot of founders, they found companies because of some pain point they had.
Yep.
And I think what I'm grateful for every single day is that we sit down and we deconstruct common problems we had at these companies. All right, when we had a lot of budget, remember that one year we had a lot of budget, what were the problems then? When we had no budget at all, we had to lay off a quarter of the team, what was our thorough problems then? When we had this new technology that came out. Remember when Russia had all this interest in us and we saw their attacks? Like, how did we defend against them? And we'll sit down for sometimes literally days of just like whiteboarding and kind of architecting out, like, what do we think the solution is? And then how do you propagate out that technology, make it super easy to use so that anybody, a junior security analyst or a more senior SOC or security engineer, a network engineer, my mom, could use the product and deploy adequate defense to whatever it is you want to protect.
Yeah. I mean, it's not lost on me that you guys are playing the game on hard mode. Like, people would pay you probably millions of dollars for this expertise as consultants or in-house, whatever, but by choosing to say, hey, how do we productize this and make this usable to, that I don't want to say the masses, but to like a mass of companies is pretty impressive. I do want to ask you, just to make it from a tactical perspective, like, help us understand the business of this. Like, what actually, when Wraithwatch is deployed, is it a pull and replace? Is it integrate into like some sort of common operating picture? Like, what is the actual mechanism for how you all deploy?
Yeah, so when Wraithwatch is deployed to a customer environment, essentially the deployment process looks like you drop some API keys in there for tools that you want to integrate with it, and then you let it do its thing. And in as fast as 22 minutes later, it will have autonomously constructed a digital twin of your environment. So we'll take, a notional aerospace company as an example. If you drop it into that environment, it'll immediately begin picking up on the fact that, okay, it appears that there's a corporate network over here. It appears that there's critical infrastructure over there, because I see some systems that are tagged as mission control. I see connected tissue between them. I see users that have access to one or both. For the users that have access to both,
I'm going to elevate them in criticality because, they have access to more of an attack surface than users that only have access to one. It'll start putting all these pieces together. It'll start reasoning over those pieces, and then it will begin churning through hundreds and thousands of permutations of possible attacks and combinations of attacks against that environment. And one of the things that we think is cool is when it is thinking through all of these various attack combinations, it's doing it in a way that's not executing actual attacks against your production network. This was a source of pain for us at previous companies when we would work with autonomous red team tools. As an example, you let those things loose on your network, you have no idea what they're going to do. They start blowing up your network with alerts. They're trying all kinds of crazy attacks on production systems. And you're like, all right, just turn this thing off because I have no idea what risk it poses to my network. And your detection and response team is also confused because they're seeing 100 alerts suddenly fill up in their queue. And they're like, are we under attack? Like from some foreign intelligence service, or like, is this an autonomous red team? What's going on here?
You might be making the adversary's job easier.
Yeah, you might be making the adversary's job easier. You're inducing alert fatigue to your teams. And so the natural reaction is then what? It's to, okay, let's still try and deploy it, but let's deploy it on like 5 systems or some very constrained subset of our environment. But that doesn't give you a representative example of your true risks. It only gives you an example of the risks for those 5 systems in that subset of your environment. So if you're able to extract a digital twin of the environment and then reason over that as much as you want, you can run hundreds of thousands of very novel attacks against that environment and surface the riskiest ones, and you haven't fired a single shot against that production network. And we always get the question when we trace out the attack paths on the product of like, well, can you prove to me that this attack is actually feasible? And it's like, hey man, if you want me to click a button and like have the thing, actually fire an attack to get from this system to that system, I can do that. But that doesn't change the fact that the path from this system to this system and the misconfiguration that unlocks that path exists. Like, if you want me to click the button, I will, but I'm telling you that this deficiency is latent in your environment and times 100. So like, should you do something about that? Or do you want to see the shiny, mutating malware that I can certainly show you, but like, we should probably fix the problem first?
From users' perspective, what they see when they log in, because we're talking a lot about sort of what's happening in the background. But from the user's perspective, when they log in, they get to see a visual representation of their environment, which exists in many other tools, but we're trying to make it look, I think we have made it look really badass and like simple to navigate through. Just camera angles, like darkness and light, what's highlighted, what's not, what has labels, what doesn't. I think it's pretty easy to navigate through this environment. You get to see systems, users, permissions, software versions we're running. And you can either choose to go into purely like, I'm bored and having coffee this morning, I just want to poke around and find things. Or you can log in on any given day and go through what Wraithwatch is surfacing to you. So what we give the users when they first log in now, it is a daily brief. So you can choose to either read through the daily brief, so a summary of maybe 3 or 4 things that are happening in your environment that you really need to focus in on now. Or you could just click play and let a nice British lady explain to you what's going on in your environment. And I think that's really cool. Like I many times I would have loved to have just like, I'm brushing my teeth in the morning, and instead of trying to, read Slack channels and all that, maybe I just open Wraithwatch on my app, click play, brush my teeth, and let it tell me, hey, you had an anomalous user that tried to exfiltrate this data. His name is X. These are his systems. You also had an attack path that was simulated that shows that one of your critical crown jewel servers is at risk. You should focus heavily on this today. The third thing you have is you have an audit coming up in 4 months, and you're really lagging behind on a lot of those frameworks. You gotta step up the pace. Or your tool ROI isn't quite giving back what you'd expect it to. You're not using some of these products like you should. So the user can go through this daily brief. They can see all these attack paths. They can click through. There's visuals. There's written summaries. And the really awesome part is it's not just an anxiety-inducing homework page of like, hey, go fix all this stuff. We're actually giving the solutions as well. We're saying, here's what we found, but don't despair.
here's the solutions.
Yeah.
Just decide, human in the loop, like what would you like to push out? You can push it from Wraithwatch, or you can push it, directly from those tools as well. And I think that's like that was a specific decision we made, was we are not going to do one of those tools that I've used, surely Nick has used, Carlos used, where you log in, you get 10,000 alerts of things that it's found. And they thrive off of this negative reinforcement. You log in, you see all these problems, and you're like, without this tool, I would never know about all these problems. You're not actually fixing even 10% of that. There's no way you can. And so it just becomes a backlog of chores. And here what we're trying to do is say, let's reason over, help you make decisions where to start, and then actually give you solutions and let you click to deploy the fix.
The common thread across all of the defense companies we saw at Demo Day was just speed to decision making for the operator. And that's lacking for cyber. And so every product design decision was made around how do we get the user speed to decision. And there are some hard lines in the sand that I kind of threw down as well. Has to be dark theme, has to be a 3D graph, not a 2D graph. And if we're going to have voice, it has to be a nice British lady, because it has to be calm and soothing.
These are the founder decisions that you get to make.
But, I think like it's little things like that make a user feel like they're living in the future. And if there's one thing that SpaceX taught us, it's that you can build something generational and transformative like the Dragon spacecraft, but you can also make it look fucking cool at the same time.
So, okay, we've talked about the product. We've talked about your backgrounds a little bit. The way you guys talk about Wraithwatch, and even yesterday at the demo day, you said this is gain of function for security. And I think that's a really interesting choice, especially being in DC, where gain of function coming out of the pandemic is, I think it's fair to describe it as a political third rail. Folks in biosecurity and in biology research don't even want to talk. It's something else now. So why gain of function, and how does that pertain to the product?
Yeah, let's not shy away from what we as humanity are trying to do with AI. We are just racing towards trying to make AI as powerful as possible. And we can all sit around and, convey theatrics like we're red teaming our models and we have AI safety teams and alignment, et cetera. The reality is none of that shit matters, because the adversaries are not doing that. Our friends overseas who are developing frontier models that are similarly capable, in some cases with DeepSeek, are even more capable than the frontier models at home, don't care about these things. They don't care about alignment. They don't care about safety. And so there's going to come a day when powerful models are going to be open and available to the public without any of these guardrails on them. And when that day comes, if we as humans and users and operators have not put the time and effort and uncomfortable kind of execution into discovering what the dark side of these models can do and are capable of, then there's no possible way we can come up with a defense against them. It's sort of like you're trying to war game a kind of global conflict for World War III, but you don't want to allow yourself to think about what the adversary is going to do in that conflict, because that breaches my alignment boundaries as a human. I don't want to think about what is possible in a nuclear conflict. I just want to think about what I would do. That's an insane way to war game a conflict. And if we're going to defend ourselves against a future where cyber weapons are powered by artificial intelligence, we have to figure out what that AI can do, and we have to utilize the findings from that exercise in order to inform the defenses that we're building against it. And so when we say gain of function for cyber defense, a lot of it comes down to the slides that we presented yesterday, where we talked through the concept a little bit. Gain of function is, outside of all the political kind of context, is nothing but you're utilizing an artificially juiced up offensive capability, in this case, an offensive AI engine, and taking the learnings from that artificially amplified offense in order to amplify a defense. And you ultimately want to propagate the defensive AI engine out into the product and into the customer environments, and then kind of just leave the offensive thing as something that you use as a stimulus for this big stimulus response cycle.
Yeah. The phrase itself, I think, is actually very fitting for what we're doing. I think you're right. It's a spicy term, but we talked a lot. We like literally red versus blue. We're like mapping out this coevolution process and how we're deploying the defense. We're like, this is gain of function. Like, think about the words. Gain of function for your defense. Gain of function for your cyber team. Like, one guy operating like 50 guys, like moving at the speed of a team of adversaries, you know? And the only way, like Nick is saying, to get the best possible defense is to have a really robust, accurate red team.
If you think about the cybersecurity industry at the macroscopic level, it really is just one big gain of function game against attacker and defender. Attackers sit around, or defenders sit around, wait for the attackers to apply some kind of stimulus to their organization, and then they have to react to that stimulus, and they have to get better. Attackers have to then get better. Defenders have to get better again. And so it is a macroscopic coevolution process. All we're doing is encoding it into a product and then executing it 100,000 times a day.
Yeah, and the important part of all of this is that there's not some like crazy juiced up red offensive agent that's running through your environment, making changes, like testing. That's not what we're doing here. There's a digital
I think that is
twin.
the question, right?
Yeah,
When you talk
that
about
is-
gain of function, are you building something that really the NSA could be using to go attack our adversaries?
Yeah, and I think the important part to talk about is like in these customer environments, the reason why there is a digital twin is because we want to be running these simulations on the digital twin. So when people ask us questions like, well, can I actually see this happen in my actual environment? It's like, you know, that's what we don't want to be doing right now. We want you to apply the best defense to your actual environment, but the purpose of the digital twin serves many purposes. Like, it's part of the design.
And to what you just alluded to, in our customer environments, they do get to take advantage of the findings and the output out of the gain of function process and get better defensive strategies out of it. Now, the unspoken thing is we're also getting better offensive strategies out of it. And is there a use case for that in a public sector or national security apparatus environment? Of course there is.
Yep.
But you know, as a venture-backed commercial company, our primary focus is on the defensive piece.
I've had a couple of VCs approach me, you know, just not like me personally to do it, but to ask like, well, why isn't someone building the venture-backed offensive cyber startup? And it's like, I think that, I don't know, I'm curious, why do you, one, is somebody building that company, or two, why not?
Having been an offensive cyber warfare operator in the past, I will say that the total addressable market for an offensive cyber weapons company is pretty limited, frankly.
Legally.
If you're doing it legally. And these things have been tried in the past. There have been tier one VCs that have backed, you know, for lack of a better term, cyber weapon companies that all they did was develop offensive cyber weapons for the US government and other entities with the authorities to execute those kinds of operations. Those companies, you know, were relatively successful, but not successful at venture scale because the market is not there. The market is there to take the defensive lessons you get from doing such things and then helping people protect themselves.
I can also almost guarantee you that if someone set out with a bunch of funding from VCs and their only job is to create offensive cyber weapons, the first thing they would realize is you can, in a bubble, create an offensive simulated attack for an environment. But what you need to make it even better is a coevolution process so that even if you come up with an offensive attack path, a strong defense responds, the red side responds again, and by the end, you have a really robust offensive process. That is a gain of function process. So whether you're using it for offensive, whether you're using it for defensive, you need a stimulus response cycle to get the best output. Full stop. It's like learning to box with simply just a bag and not an actual person in front of you, sparring, tackling, boxing, whatever it is. You're not going to get better if you're just punching at a bag.
Yeah.
To me, it's very similar.
And this speaks to the folks who are purely focused on, you know, red teaming as venture-backed startups. And I love some of those guys.
Yeah.
You know, they're friends of mine and they're doing really good stuff. But as a former CIO and CISO, red teaming is sort of table stakes. It's like, yeah, I'm always getting lists of chores to do. And a red teaming product just adds to that list of chores for me to do. Like, help me contextualize the chores, help me
Solve the problem.
solve the problems, help me deploy the fixes back into my environment. It's that second piece that's missing, that has always been missing from the industry. It's like anybody can give you a list of 100 things can do. Wiz does it really well for your cloud, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company. What they don't allow you to do very easily is take action to actually remediate the fixes. What they don't do very well is tell you things outside of your cloud environment. A modern day corporate IT cyber environment transcends the cloud by many orders of magnitude. There's endpoints, there's permissions, there's identity, there's on-prem servers. There's just all kinds of things that these products don't cover. And if they do, it's just appending to your list of chores. And what we want to do is say, don't even look at the chores. Okay. If you want to, you can look at them over here. But what we've done is generate all of those chores on the back end, contextualize the best ways to fix them, and then presented the most critical things for you to pay attention to right here. I feel like we're talking about the product a lot, like is turning into a sales pitch. So,
I mean, I think these like lessons learned though should be applied at other companies, at other products. Like what we really want is to just see an overall drop in the number of successful cyber breaches. I'm tired of opening up my even personal email and it being like, oh, so sorry, your social security number. Sorry about that. Like we were at an attack and OPM, breach.
Yeah, but the government's been giving me identity alerts for
like
10 years
free
now.
identity monitoring
so
for
secure.
It's like
your credit monitoring is good to go for the
and
next
then it's like,
20
your
years.
credit
I learn every
monitoring
time a
got-
pedophile moves down the street.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
I'm frankly sick to death of that. And like we have just look at the numbers, like look at all the cyber breaches that have successfully happened at every type of company, healthcare companies. We don't even blink. It was in the news for 2 freaking days that all these major healthcare companies were literally down. There's a lot of their servers, a lot of their databases were literally inaccessible for multiple days. Yeah. I'm tired of hearing about this. Telecom companies. I'm tired of hearing about people being shocked when AT&T gets hit.
What's it going to take to change? Because I think, and this isn't just cybersecurity. I mean, we're in DC. There was a horrific collision between a passenger plane and a military helicopter just a few weeks ago. And it was kind of like, okay, we'll investigate. And then 2 days later, everything goes back to normal. We don't really have answers. And I think the same is true, probably 10x in the cyber world, where we're kind of just, it's kind of like, well, we just kind of expect that China has all our information. We expect that adversaries have whatever they want. And so we just kind of learn to live with that. So you have things like two-factor, you change your passwords off or whatever. You file your taxes in different ways now than you did a few years ago. What's it going to take to change this current environment?
Let's try something different, something that feels scary initially. Like, I think this is what we talked about a lot is like, what will it change to completely invert this paradigm? Like, what do you have to do? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to war game your own customer environment constantly. You have to always be knowing what an adversary might do. And we mapped this out on napkins. Like literally, we're like, all right, so what if you can red team your own environment? What does that actually do though if it's super advanced nation states? And we talked about, we're like, well, what normally happens is like you simulate one attack, they respond with some defense, it goes back and forth, and you get the best possible offensive strategy. And that's what those nation state adversaries deploy to you. So they're doing that in a simulated environment somewhere. Overseas, they're doing that. Why aren't we doing that internally in our own environment? Why can't we give the customer access to say, let me ping pong back and forth between a wealth of knowledge about past cyber attacks, about compliance frameworks, MITRE ATT&CK frameworks, whatever it is, and my own customer environment. So I get a custom formula for the best defense possible.
Here's my fear, Grace, and for Nick, for you too, is that really easier for these companies to do, or is it easier for them to say, I'm sorry, pay some fine and move on because it happens to everybody?
Yeah, I think, I was just at a health tech conference a couple weeks ago discussing this very issue. And one of the things that came up in that conference was the Change Health breach. 200 million Americans' medical records leaked, and several billion in damages at this point between legal fees and fines and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I think the answer to your question would have been, before that breach, yeah, it's probably easier to just pay the fine and move on. But the order of magnitude of damage that breach costs, I think, is an early indication of the kind of damage that future cyber attacks are going to be capable of causing. And so if we as a society don't want to bear the brunt of that kind of cost, day after day, week after week, month after month, because these new advanced cyber weapons are going to be mutating in scope and capability, et cetera, with all of the things that Gen AI brings to the table. Then the answer to your question is we have to pay attention to the problem at hand. And we think that we can do this effectively at low cost and in a way that is going to help the humans that already exist in these organizations to offload a lot of the cognitive burden onto the artificial intelligence engines. And if we can do that successfully, then I think where we'll land is a place where people want to engage with these systems, because what these systems are allowing them to do is, unlike software tools of the past, the powerful thing about Gen AI is it lets you explore multiverses of possibilities all at the same time, and then tells you, pick this one, and if you do, you will be 10x more secure than you are today. And I can help you get there by minimizing friction and minimizing business impact. But if you want, here's all these other possibilities as well. That's the power that Gen AI unlocks. It's like all of those permutations and all of that analysis all in front of you. And I think that's a powerful proposition for me as the lone security engineer at a defense tech company trying to figure out what it is I need to do next. Let me put something in front of you that tells you all of the worlds of possibilities that might exist, and then takes you by the hand and guides you through them.
Yeah, I think when we think about some of these attacks that we just talked about and some of the breaches of these various companies, like, yeah, that maybe they move on and pay a fine. But we've seen CISOs' heads roll for this. I think actually there's like worse and worse repercussions happening. And I think when we think about like defending all these aerospace defense manufacturing companies, think about when we actually are in a war against, we're involved in a war against Taiwan and China. Like, do you think that when you imagine that scenario, don't you think those cyber adversaries on the China side are going to come for all of our infrastructure, whether it's water, nuclear power, electricity, banking systems? And it's not going to be a matter of just paying a fine when you can't access all those resources. And that's what we are preparing for that day, is how do we get all these companies in America defended, locked up, shored up for that inevitable day? You can pay fines, but think about the more serious repercussions one day if we are actually involved in a war.
I hear you. I think we suffer in this, just like a lot of things, from two things. One, just a failure of imagination, and the second is a collective action problem. And the failure of imagination doesn't take that line brings in my head, it's the 9/11 report, right? It's just, this is the inability for, and not even the American people, but even just different entities within a government or within an organization to imagine that this information could be used in different ways. And the collective action problem is that the harm is distributed. It's not felt by, you mentioned the CISO problem. It's like, okay, well, if some person is directly accountable for that and is going to be hauled into court, like, okay, maybe that person is going to care. But right now, when the pain is felt by a lot of different people, across large groups, it's hard for a company to prioritize that. So I think you're absolutely right. And hopefully that does change. Obviously, you two and the company will be at the forefront of that. I want to do two things and then move to get you guys on your way here. The first is I just want to talk briefly about the kind of the status quo. You've alluded to the issues, the shortcomings of red teaming. I want to talk about this on the AI side a little bit, and then I'll just plant in your minds where I'd love to end is you two have been a part of many of the best brands in the world. I'd love to think about just like one or two lessons from the companies that you've been in that are directly informing how you're building this company. So you can start thinking on that. The first thing, though, on this red teaming, I think, it feels like every couple of months, at least once a quarter now, the major AI labs are releasing a new frontier model. And along with it, they'll put out a model card and they'll say, we did testing for cybersecurity. We did testing for, misinformation and disinformation. We did testing for national security risk, cyber risk. And I'm curious, as you guys look at these things and you see, okay, well, on one hand, these companies are at least making steps to show like, okay, we care about some of this stuff. We're trying to figure out what we're putting out in the world. How good of a job are they doing at that? And does any of that matter? Like, do the model cards matter right now?
I have friends at many of these companies, and we use these companies as models, and many of the technologies they've put in place around the models, they're doing great work. Unfortunately, I think the efforts around safety and alignment and cybersecurity testing are some of the biggest wastes of time on the planet. And it goes back to
Why? Yeah.
it goes back to what I alluded to earlier, which is to say our adversaries who are also developing powerful frontier models do not care about AI safety and alignment and cybersecurity testing. They are going to allow these models to do many, many things, one of which is to power advanced forms of malware, advanced forms of disinformation bots, things that we can't even conceptualize as humans today. And if we're not able to have the foresight in order to predict along some concrete dimension what those kinds of weaponization methods look like so that we can build defenses for them, then we are moving into the future with blindfolds on. And that's why I think it's great to have a version of the model that is secure and controlled, that have gone through all these model card tests, and maybe that's the publicly releasable one. But I think there should be separate versions of the model, separate tiers of the model that are available to, let's say, cybersecurity researchers, because at the end of the day, the way cybersecurity, especially as an industry, works is you are going through this stimulus response attacker defender cycle, and the defenders are going to be on the back foot if you just kind of clutch at your pearls and say, we're never going to let you even conceptualize of how this could be used in an attack.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so many conversations with folks, mostly on the public sector side, where we'll be in a meeting with them and they'll tell us about how, they're doing all this work to make sure these models are secure and they can't be abused and used like in an inappropriate way. And then we'll tell them, well, what about open source models? Like, what about what open source models can do? We can show you one right now that'll tell us how to make meth. And they're like, well, no. And Nick will literally pull out his laptop and be like, here's an open source model. I'm going to tell it, how do I make meth step by step? I'm going to tell it to create a new version of a cyber attack for me to own the system. And so it's almost like we've tricked ourselves into thinking that, like, put blindfolds on, we're protecting all these like foundational models over here. And we're forgetting about how adversaries are using those systems, open source available models. And it feels like a burn of energy. So spend some time there, sure, go ahead. But let's focus on bigger picture, longer term, and take blindfolds off.
I think this is the question, is like, what keeps us from nihilism and just throwing up our hands and saying, this is the direction we're going in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a decision we'll have to make as a society. But I think if we are wanting to be contributing members to a society that wants to be better than we are today, then we should take measures to try and understand how this technology can be weaponized against ourselves. And one thing that frustrates me is many times these organizations will triumphantly say things like, well, our model actually escaped out of the virtual machine that we were doing the test in. And but don't worry, like we kind of stripped it of that ability. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's good now.
And I'm thinking in my head, if you guys were able to do that with this model, and then I'm looking at this other one over here that's very similar and it's open source, all it takes is a few weeks or a few months of R&D effort in order to get this open source thing over here to do that same virtual machine escape. And how am I supposed to arm myself as a defender for an autonomous swarm of AIs that are able to do things like escape virtual machines? Like, if I'm not able to explore the ramifications of what these things are able to do, I can't defend against them.
I still think that we should be approaching this problem carefully. Like, I do believe that there's much opportunity to allow for great destruction if you're not thinking about all the good and bad use cases. We have a lot of responsibility on our side to make sure that all the learnings on the offensive side, what happens with those? Where is that information even stored for a customer? We talk openly with our customers about where it's stored, what we destroy, how we don't propagate red team offensive learnings to other customer environments. There's a great responsibility here on our part, and anyone that's working with artificial intelligence, like, to think about these things. But we should not shy away from evolution of these technologies and also understanding what the dark side looks like.
Yeah, to the extent that we can.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There's a lot to that's still to come on this, and no, it's deliberately to kind of just say, like, I think there's the false sense of security that we may enjoy in certain environments is just that.
Psychologists will tell you part of evolving as a human, and I think part of evolving as a society is synthesizing the dark side of, your own nature, and integrating that into yourself and allowing something good to come out of it. And if we just deny the fact that our dark side even exists and dark sides of this technology that we're building even exists, then that thing is going to metastasize over time and come back to bite us. And so the best thing we can do is proactively understand and explore what that thing is and how we can best integrate it and have something good come out of it.
I just want to ping pong the companies that you guys have been at. It'd be malpractice for me to not ask you to try to summarize like one, and I know this is gross oversimplification, but we'll start with Palantir, and then we go SpaceX, and then come back to Anduril, and just kind of one quick lesson that is informing how you're building Wraithwatch. So Nick, you want to start with Palantir?
Exceptionally high bar for hiring and performance and feedback. Sometimes at Palantir, you would get a sheet of constructive criticism from peers that you were on a project with, and it would be some of the most vicious feedback you have ever seen in your life, but it was delivered to you in this trusting, almost loving way of, hey man, we're telling you all this for you to get better, so read through it and get better.
Do better next time.
See you Monday. That cycle of just constant kind of feedback and iterating on yourself and getting better performance-wise is something I'll never forget. Like the founders at Palantir built a special kind of culture over there where that's just the way it works. You're constantly expected to get better, and you're expected to get better through peer feedback and just work on yourself. And that leads to very tight-knit, kind of high-performing teams, especially on the pilot side. This is circa 2016 Palantir, so I don't know how it is today, but there was sort of, on the business development, customer-facing side, kind of two flavors of teams: pilot teams and implementation teams. And I loved being on the pilot teams because the kind of mandate of the pilot teams was parachute into this Swiss bank and get them to, buy a very expensive Palantir license. You have 3 months to do it. Convince them the product is good. Go. Pick your team. Go. And it was the closest I ever felt to kind of being back in the world of special operations, where it's kind of the same thing. Parachute into this environment. The parameters of mission success are very ambiguous, but go and figure it out. And that's the kind of culture they've built over there. So that's one lesson I have definitely taken out of Palantir and try to apply here.
Come back and do how you're trying to apply. We'll do that another time. Grace, why don't we go to SpaceX?
I think there's many lessons that I learned working there. I loved my experience there. I'm so grateful for it. I think the biggest one that we've taken and applied now at Wraithwatch is failing fast and iterating quickly. Do not be afraid to fail. Move fast and quickly. And when you reach a 1 year, timeline, you'll look back and you'll say, well, we tried 806 different options. This is definitely the best one. We know that from experience now, versus a competitor company that often says, well, let's take a year to plan and build one really good version. They get to the end, they realize that their version doesn't work. We've tried 860 different options. So failing fast, iterating quickly, it's actually quite a painful process to implement and practice every day. But there's something really beautiful that happens at Wraithwatch, I think, across our team. There's like this ego death that happens for everybody that we've hired and brought on. They're excellent team of people, and they come in and it takes a lot to learn this type of a culture where they can spend a week, 4 weeks building or writing some code for something. And there's really something awesome that happens a few weeks into being there, where they realize, well, actually, this isn't the best way to approach this problem. Scrap everything I did, start from fresh. And it's hard for the team to practice that, hard for me to practice that every day, but it's definitely a lesson I've learned from SpaceX. It's a formula for success.
I love it. I mean, we had another visible, I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. There's a massive, rocket explosion in the atmosphere, and people are laughing at Elon on X. Like, it's like, these guys launched. I mean, these guys are going to get to Mars, and we're laughing because the rocket exploded. It just shows how we're sick as a culture. But anyway, it's a good one. That's a really good one. Nick, you got one from SpaceX also that you want to share?
SpaceX, incredible culture of just aggressive execution, aggressive execution towards a concrete goal. And if you stumble and fall while you're getting there, pick your ass up and keep moving. And if you kind of combine the things that I talked about at Palantir, mash them up with the culture at SpaceX. I think the culture we've built at Wraithwatch is one of aggressive execution, rapid shipping of features, with the culture around, if you find a better way to do it, then burn what you built down and rebuild it, and let's do it the right way. And if we have to set things on fire to get there, let's do that. And people feel comfortable doing that, knowing that, there's not going to be some repercussion against them because, they took 2 extra days to rebuild something that's going to work better.
That's great on SpaceX. Let's do a quick popcorn on Anduril. What do you got, Grace?
Sounds good. I mean, at Anduril, I think I got a great opportunity to really hone in and build a quality caliber team. So I was focused a lot on recruiting the right types of people with pretty minimal budget. And so that taught me a lot of what to look for in certain candidates. I only had a couple headcount, like who are the killers that I want on my side, on my team. And so it taught me to think about, look for people that might not have this and this wasn't the same at SpaceX as well, is look for people that don't necessarily have this classically trained, multiple degrees, they haven't necessarily worked at a FANG company, but oftentimes that's great. You want to find people that love what they do, have a passion for it in their free time and their hobbies. They're tinkering, they're building, they're exploring, they're challenging their brain. They're describing in interviews, hey, I was actually bored at work one day, so I went home and I built my own computer, or I built an app that tells me the weather in this one place and then actually shares it with my mom. Just random problems, because they really want to evolve and learn and have such a passion for their work. And people that frankly will do anything you ask them to do. They don't care at all about titles, no matter how mature the company is. My dad taught me this. Anything someone asks you to do, you do it. If it's part of the company mission, if it's going to evolve the business, you do it. You don't ask questions. Doesn't matter if it's below your title or your pay. Get it done if it's for the greater good. And that's something that I really got to practice and learn at Anduril and building out that team.
Nick, what you got on Anduril?
Man, Anduril was a ride. I joined when it was 100 people. We all kind of knew each other. We'd order pizza for lunch, and everyone kind of would eat lunch in the same room. And then when I left, it was, I think we were about to hit 4,000 people. And so the hyper growth of the company was just something insane for me to contend with. Building a cybersecurity team there was one of the most difficult challenges I've ever faced in my life, just sustaining a security team through that hyper growth. And coming out of the organizations that I had worked at in the past, I knew as kind of a first principle thing that it wasn't going to be enough to just build out a corporate security team. It's we're building weapon systems, and there's communication backhauls between those weapon systems that are out in combat zones and cloud environments, a corporate environment. So you really, if you're building a cybersecurity program that's going to be worth the shit, you have to take all those things into account. So what I tried to do was not only build out the corporate security side of the house, but also take into account weapon system security, insider threat, counter-espionage, counterintelligence, and kind of roll it under one roof. And not to say that other people couldn't have done a great job with it, but I felt like if we could roll it all under one umbrella, everything kind of similar to what we do at Wraithwatch, we break down all the silos and make all these functions operate seamlessly and holistically, and they're just able to move faster and make decisions faster, and there's just inherent sense of trust amongst all the teams. If you look at a lot of other security teams, the insider threat function lives over there, and the IT function lives over there, security function lives over here. None of them really trust each other. You go to the other one and you ask for some data, and they're like, I don't know, I gotta ask my boss. And if everything just lives under one roof, everyone's just functioning as a high performing kind of Formula One pit crew. And that's what I tried to build there. I did. A lot of folks ask me why would you leave? Number one, I pass off the team to an excellent successor. Joe McCaffrey is the CISO over there now. One of the best guys I've ever worked with in my life. Former Marine officer. He's doing a great job over there now. So I knew that the team would be in good hands with him. And the second thing is, I hate to say it, but it was kind of that In-Q-Tel conversation of, the In-Q-Tel CEO, just when he said that, the comment hit me like a ton of bricks on my face. I was like, yeah, I could have more of an impact in this world. I built out this security program, and now it's kind of,
a well-oiled machine.
It's a well-oiled machine. It's a flywheel that's spinning on its own. what now it's in kind of maintenance mode. Like, where do I go do a 0 to 1 thing again? And that's how we ended up with Wraithwatch and why we're in this room today.
Guys, this has been so much fun. Thank you for your time here. You're both great Americans who've done so much for the mission already, and I know we're going to continue to do it. So we're gonna keep close tabs on Wraithwatch. Look forward to watching the journey, and thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks for all the thoughtful questions.